please feel free to stop me. Okay, so the intention of this assessment is to identify vehicles in Hampton's fleet that would be cost effective to convert to battery electric vehicles, BEVs, or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, PHEVs, and to summarize the resulting financial and environmental benefits. Oh, I'm sorry, I just realized I'm not sharing my screen. One moment. Okay, it doesn't look like I have the ability to share my screen.
I'm going to make you a co-host.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Then you can share.
Okay.
Okay. Should be all set now.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Now we can.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that. All right. Let me do this. Okay, so this slide is just an overview of our process for the assessment. So at this point, you have provided us your fleet and usage data. We've used our assumptions to help fill in any gaps and to establish, you know, an existing baseline for the fleet. We then used our electric vehicle model library that has over 500 EV models to run a total cost of ownership or TCO comparison for each vehicle. So the total cost of ownership for each vehicle includes the vehicle capital costs, annual fuel and maintenance costs. And for EVs, this also includes the charging infrastructure, hardware, and installation costs, and applies potential grants for both electric vehicles and for the charging infrastructure. So these calculations determine our EV acquisition recommendations, which recommend the lowest cost EV option for each vehicle only when the TCO of the electric vehicle is less than the equivalent internal combustion engine vehicle. So again, today we're going to review the initial results, and then we'll give you some time to review the presentation and the recommendations, and to provide feedback and make any adjustments to the data you provided as you see fit. We'll then update the assessment as needed and share the final report along with an Excel supplement, which we'll go over in this presentation as well. And then you have the opportunity to request a report refresh twice a year. And so that allows for new models to be included in the assessment and new incentive and grant programs. So we're constantly updating this to make sure that that's included in the model. And, you know, as you have changes to your fleet, you can provide that to us as well, and we can fine tune the report. So this program runs through 2024. And Andrew will be your main point of contact for any report refreshes and things like that. So here's just a quick overview of the program roadmap to date. So as we had a scoping call with Bob several weeks ago, and up until now, or since then, we've been analyzing the data and running it through our model. And so we're now at step 7 here, where we're presenting the results. And then after this call, this is just a guide for some high-level next steps for what to do with what we've provided you. So obviously you'll want to review this slide and the recommendations in more detail. Reach out to Andrew with questions and to help plan next steps. Review the fleet portal, which is an online platform that has you know, various resources to help with fleet electrification. You'll want to share this report with internal and external stakeholders and explore incentive and grant opportunities that are available. National Grid is available to help you know, with charging infrastructure planning and discussions. So I don't think Sejal was able to join this call this morning, but she will be the best point of contact to start those conversations. And then of course, request report refreshes throughout 2024 from us. So this is just a brief overview of the existing fleet data that was provided to us. So this breaks down Hampton's fleet by fuel type and vehicle type. So the table on the left here shows a breakdown of Hampton's fleet by fuel type, which shows that the majority of these vehicles run on gasoline, while the heavy duty vehicles primarily run on diesel. I will note that the fuel type wasn't included in the data provided, but we used a VIN decoder to determine the fuel types for each of these vehicles. And so then the chart on the right just shows a breakdown of Hampton's fleet by vehicle type, which shows that, outside of the vehicles that are classified as other, which we'll discuss on the next slide, the majority of Hampton's fleets are SUVs and pickups. So those vehicles that were classified as other are the 1 ambulance and the 7 fire trucks or fire engines that are in the fleet. And that's because at this point, there are not electric vehicle equivalents commercially available for those types of vehicles. There are some that are in testing, but they're just not quite there yet. So they're excluded from the analysis for now. But as those vehicles become available in the future, they will be included in this report. So the report that we'll provide you will kind of go into more detail on all the assumptions that were used in this analysis, but I just wanted to go over some high-level assumptions here. So as I mentioned before, we only recommend EV replacements when the total cost of ownership is lower than that of a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. For vehicle replacements, we estimated the retirement schedule for each vehicle based on the in-service date in the data that was provided, as well as or the vehicle model year if we didn't have the in-service date, and then the vehicle lifespan or the cycle that Bob provided for each vehicle. And then the model also accounts for each EV's mileage range per charge and assumes that an average daily mileage, excuse me, sorry, I lost my place here, and assumes that an average daily mileage is based on the annual mileage that was provided to us, and accounts for temperature impacts. So that reduces the EV model ranges that we have in our model library to 80% of their maximum range. And that's just to be conservative and make sure we're kind of, including weather aspects in New England into these recommendations. So the assessment also incorporates grant and incentive programs into when we're determining the total cost of ownership. So based on the fleet data that we were provided, there are 3 incentive programs that Hampton is eligible for at this point. And so this table just provides a breakdown of those funding sources and which kinds of vehicles that they're applicable to, who the administrator is, what costs are covered, what the program offerings are, so how much is actually being covered, and any upcoming deadlines for these grants. So the 3 programs that were included are National Grid's EV Charging Station Program, which offers incentives for charging hardware and installation costs. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection's Mass EVIP program, which offers incentives for charging hardware and installation as well. And then the Green Communities Grant Program, which offers incentives for vehicle costs. So just a couple notes about how these were applied to the analysis. The analysis caps incentive amounts so that you're never receiving more than the cost of the vehicle and the charging hardware. And some of these programs are not mutually exclusive. So if you apply to one, you're not precluded from applying to others, but there are some programs where you can't apply more than one funding source to like one specific vehicle. So for example, the Mass EVIP fleet incentives and the green community funds cannot be applied to the purchase of one vehicle. And so that's why, although we have the mass EVIP incentives for charging hardware listed here, we don't have the mass EVIP incentives for vehicles because the Green Communities program precludes that. Okay, so now moving on to the actual recommendations. So this is just a high-level breakdown of how many vehicles were recommended for conversion based on the data that we received. So there was a total of 38 fleet vehicles and non-road equipment in the data that we received. Out of those, we identified 26 active on-road vehicles. 18 of those have EV equivalents available now or in the near future. And then 5 of those are cost beneficial to convert to electric. So I will note that because, based on our intake call with Bob a few weeks ago, we ultimately restricted recommendations to only 4-wheel drive vehicles and highway department vehicles that are plow capable. And so that those requirements reduce the number of recommendations a bit. So I have included a slide at the end with those requirements removed just to see, just for reference and to see what other vehicles are available. But that would increase the number of vehicles recommended for conversion to 12 versus 5. But the remainder of this analysis is focused on just these 5 vehicles. And I will also note that this report and this assessment is really focused on on-road vehicles. We do have a section that goes over the non-road equipment, but we don't actually provide one-to-one recommendations for that equipment. It's more so, here's what you could potentially save if you were to purchase electric non-road equipment versus, gas or diesel equipment. And then some common manufacturers based on the type of equipment. So this is the recommendation time frame for so we started the analysis at 2023, and then it runs through 2037, which accounts for a maximum vehicle life of 20 years based on the vehicle cycles provided. And then the total cost of ownership analysis extends through 2050 to account for the total, the cost across the full life of the vehicles replaced through 2037. And so by converting those 5 vehicles to electric, this is a brief overview of the financial savings and the environmental impacts of converting those vehicles. So it would result in almost $48,000 in total cost of ownership savings over 28 years, almost $15,000 in fuel savings, over $19,000 in maintenance savings, and it would result in the reduction of 207 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And so to put that into context, we've included some equivalencies on the right here to just kind of help visualize what 207 metric tons of carbon dioxide equates to. And so here are the actual recommendations for each vehicle. So it's summarized by vehicle type here, but this ultimately shows what the lowest total cost of ownership vehicle model would be, and shows how many for each of the vehicle types in the fleet, how many are up for retirement, how many are recommended to convert to electric, what the recommended make and model are, the financial savings, the greenhouse gas reductions, and the recommended charging hardware to support those vehicles. And so our, a couple notes just about the charging hardware, and there's another slide after this that breaks it down a bit more, but we do assume a 1-to-1 vehicle to charger ratio in this analysis. And we also assume that infrastructure is purchased and installed when the electric vehicle is purchased, rather than purchasing all of the charging infrastructure up front. In reality, it's, again, you can talk with National Grid about this, but it may make more sense to purchase, charging infrastructure up front and install it rather than doing it on a one-off basis. And there are ways to reduce the number of chargers that you need based on, how you charge your vehicles and, where you garage them, and you could potentially have, more than one vehicle to one charger. But these are just the assumptions that are used in this analysis. So based on these recommendations, our analysis recommends a maximum of 5 level 2 chargers to support the 5 vehicles. And as I mentioned earlier, these recommendations could change over time as new EV models are added to our assessment, and as new incentive programs become available or extended. So any report refreshes in the future will incorporate that and may result in different recommendations. So are there any recommendations here that stand out that may not work for Hampton's fleet? And again,
I wonder why you recommend L2s. In my own case, I have an electric car. An L2, level 2 charger will charge the batteries 7 or 8 hours. A level 3 will do it in about 20 minutes. And are we not being very far-sighted if we install level 2s?
So that's correct. So the level 2 definitely charges vehicles much slower than a DC fast. What our analysis does is ultimately assumes that vehicles can charge overnight and have at least 6 hours to charge overnight. And so, based on the vehicle's average daily mileage, the efficiency of the vehicle, and the efficiency of the vehicle, we've determined, how much power would be required to fully charge the vehicle overnight based on having at least 6 hours to charge overnight. So this is really focused on, this overnight charging. But say you wanted to charge vehicles in between shifts, and especially for like larger vehicles or police patrol vehicles, DC fast might be a better option because they do charge vehicles much quicker. And so, we can certainly make adjustments to the model. Like if you'd rather not consider overnight charging and just consider charging between shifts, we can make those adjustments. And that might actually push the model to recommend DC fast chargers over level 2 chargers.
Well, I guess overnight will work. And certainly the level 2s are far less expensive than the level 3s.
Correct.
I have an application actually that goes in today to the state EVIP program, and they're going to offer a grant to install level 2s or a level 2 system. We had some discussion here about where to do that. There's some constraints in the town hall parking lot. However, the director of the senior center said that there's space over there, and we're likely to put a charging system over there. It would not be for municipal vehicles. It would be for the public. And communities in our region are establishing these chargers basically for public use rather. And I'm not sure what they've done. I know Wilbraham has moved very rapidly towards electrification. I think East Long Meadow has done the same. But the chargers for the public are relatively few and far between. Munson has some public chargers, and I don't know. I think Wilbraham has some. I know Long Meadow doesn't have any, other than a private organization provides chargers. So that's something that, you know, we're going to have to grapple with. Presumably, with high gas prices, residents of Hamden are going to be looking at electric vehicles, just as it seems to be happening across the country. And so there's going to be some demand. I'm not even aware of demand right now, but it's going to come our way. And so certainly going ahead with a plan for chargers for the public, I think makes sense. And we haven't even begun to discuss having those chargers, let's say at the highway garage or in other municipal facilities. So.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So this assessment is really just focused on charging the vehicles in Hamden's fleet. It doesn't really take into account public charging infrastructure and, you know, who else might be using these chargers outside of Hamden's fleet. So if you are looking to install infrastructure that both serves the public as well as your fleet, that might change, you know, the level and the location of the chargers.
There are some large companies that are putting in level 2 chargers. I know Big Y is now installing level 2s because you can plug in and they want you to stay in the store longer so that while your car is charging. I know Whole Foods does the same thing. Whole Foods is free. Big Y charges for the electricity. And then we have the casino downtown in Springfield where they have a whole bank of chargers. They're all free, so long as you're in the casino, losing money. So,
right. Yeah, and I do expect to see more public DC fast chargers get installed, and you know, over the next couple of years, just because of the influx of federal funding that's now available. But we'll likely really be seeing those along highway corridors. And, you know, mostly community charging or places with long dwell times will see more level 2 charging. Certainly.
anyone else have comments or questions?
All right. Yeah, again, please.
Emily,
Please
this is
oh, sure. Hi, Sejal.
Hi, yeah, I joined earlier. Sorry, I didn't want to stop your flow there, but I just want to say hello. I'm Sejal Shah. I'm with National Grid. I'm the program manager, and just to put my 2 cents in onto this conversation about charging infrastructure. So it is a conversation that a lot of our participants are having, and we purposefully designed this model with a very conservative, economical approach of recommending chargers that are best fit for overnight charging, because that is most economical for charging costs for the community. As Emily said, DC fast chargers are expensive in itself to install, but then also to operate, because there's demand charges included. You know, if you're not using that electricity, there is a demand charge cost that's associated with that. Having said that, so, you know, that operation and maintenance cost does increase. But what, you know, we would like to do now that you have this report, you're going to be able to digest it over the next couple of, you know, weeks and months, is come back after you've had a chance to understand your vehicle recommendations, and then we can have conversations on the charger side and help walk you through that as well. So if one particular site, your highway department, if you're going to be, you know, you're looking at electrifying 4 or 5 vehicles at that location over the next 3 years, does it make sense to put in a DC fast charger to future-proof, as the gentleman was saying, for your future fleet needs, you know, for more heavy-duty vehicles, medium heavy-duty vehicles? So those are all conversations to have as you start thinking through your vehicle recommendations and conversions. And then the next step would be for that charger conversation. So just wanted to add that in there as well.
Yeah, thank you.
What's the cost of the level 2 as opposed to the level 2s? I don't know what the real cost, $40,000 maybe, but the state program would pay the entire cost. And then National Grid has also a grant program. So if we are able to put, let's say, a charging system in at the senior center, we would be able to do it without any outlay from the town. I'm wondering if you take the state's money, do they regulate what you can charge per kilowatt hour?
No.
Okay,
My
because
understanding. Yeah,
I
my
find there's a
understanding
wide difference from charger to charger. My car will charge for 300 miles. I can pay, the lowest price I've ever paid is $8 and something for a full charge. The highest price I've paid is $32. And that all comes down to what the vendor charges per kilowatt hour. And so the town would have to decide. I know some towns boost the charge per kilowatt hour above what they pay, so that it becomes a revenue stream for them. What?
That's why we want.
Yeah, it becomes a revenue stream. And others try and keep the cost relatively close to what they are paying per kilowatt hour. So.
And I just want to get back to that $40,000 amount. Is that something that was quoted to you specifically, or is that a part of that massive application?
I think it's less than that. But
I agree.
I was urged to apply for $50,000, which is what we did. You know, so
I see. Yeah, I haven't seen too many level 2s come in at that price point, so I would be surprised. It may involve, and it depends. I shouldn't say it that way, but it depends on where you're installing the chargers. If you have a lot, if you're digging up asphalt, across your entire parking lot to get to a particular spot, that cost could definitely go to that amount. But yeah, that seems a little high to me.
Well, we clearly have some work to do in terms of location. And other discussions with the selectmen, certainly, about this program. But, it seems to me that we can take advantage of the existing grant programs to, provide an amenity to the public in Hampden. And I think that will become more in demand as time goes on. So.
Yeah,
I've been in California a lot, and one of the towns, Walnut Creek, which is near the Tesla factory, you walk down the street, it looks like one of every 4 vehicles is a Tesla. So, and I know they're certainly well ahead of the other states in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah, I think, as part of that conversation, we're happy to talk that through with you, even if it's not a fleet charger. So if you want to have that conversation, I'd be happy to have that. Just discuss like location and then future proofing. So if you are paying for the entire parking lot to be dug up to install that one charger, make sure we future proof, run enough conduits so that you can expand as demand grows. So all of those variables to take into account as you work through the project.
Okay.
Any
more to
additional questions?
This? Anybody else?
I've got a few more slides, which I'll get through quickly because I know we're coming to the end of the meeting. Okay, excellent. All right, so I think I pretty much touched upon everything I wanted to in this slide, but this is just a summary of the total equipment and installation costs for those 5 level 2 chargers that are recommended. And this is actually before grant and incentives are applied, so the cost would actually be reduced, or less than this.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this shows the annual total cost of ownership comparison if you were to replace those 5 vehicles with electric vehicles as opposed to internal combustion engine vehicles. And this, this timeline is based on the existing fleet retirement schedule, which I will show in a couple slides. But essentially what you can see here is that the annual total cost of ownership of the internal combustion vehicle replacements is greater than the electric vehicle replacements that we are recommending. And that's largely due to the availability of grant funding. And then this is just the cumulative total cost of ownership for those internal combustion engine vehicle replacements and the recommended electric vehicle replacements. And so this is the existing fleet retirement schedule that we came up with. And this again is based on the in-service date that was provided and the life cycle for each of the vehicles that was provided. And this differs a little bit from the recommended EV replacement timeline, which I'll show in the next slide. But you'll see ultimately that this shows a high number of vehicles estimated for retirement in 2023, and that's due to some older vehicles in the fleet, as well as shorter lifespans associated with police patrol vehicles. But the recommended EV replacement timeline actually, we show, again, as I mentioned before, we only recommend EV replacements when the total cost of ownership is lower than internal combustion engine replacements. So the vehicles that are up for retirement in 2023 are not necessarily cost effective until later years. And so that's why they're pushed out a bit in this timeline. And then this is just a side-by-side comparison of the total fleet retirement schedule and then the recommended EV replacement schedule. And so again, while these recommendations are based on vehicles with the lowest total cost of ownership, there may be other models available that fit your fleet's needs and are in a similar price range, or maybe you have a preference over a certain manufacturer over others. So we will include a comparison like this one on the right for each of the vehicle types, so you can see what other models are available. And I will just note, and this will be mentioned in the report, but these graphs show the total cost of ownership for a single vehicle, and they don't account for incentives or infrastructure costs. So it's really just comparing the capital, fuel, and maintenance costs of gasoline vehicles, diesel vehicles, and electric vehicles. And then finally, the fleet environmental impact analysis of the report provides a comparison of the greenhouse gas emissions if you were to replace the recommended vehicles with internal combustion engine vehicles versus EVs. So this chart specifically shows the cumulative carbon dioxide emissions from conventional vehicles versus electric vehicles. And as I previously mentioned, by converting the 5 recommended vehicles to EVs, your fleet would reduce its carbon emissions by 207 metric tons and its nitrogen oxide emissions by 78 pounds over 28 years. And again, some equivalencies are listed here. So that would be equivalent to removing 45 passenger vehicles from the road for 1 year. And so for the non-road equipment recommendations, again, we just provide a high level summary of potential financial savings and greenhouse gas emission reductions if you were to electrify your non-road equipment. We had to classify several pieces of equipment as other. This included, trailers and compressors and things like that, just because the model only reviews a certain number or certain types of non-road equipment at this point that have commercially available EV equivalents.
One of the questions that arises in these discussions is how will the electric company be able to supply the very significant increase in demand for electricity as more people purchase electric cars?
I can take that one, Emily. So yeah, that's a great question. And that's why we're running programs like this, frankly, so that we can understand how fleets are going to start electrifying, as well as individual consumers, our residential customer base. So we have an off-peak charging rebate program for that as well right now that's running. So we are actively working on that to ensure that the power is ready when vehicles are deployed. We're putting it into our forecasting, asking our regulators for approvals to get our infrastructure in line with what we're going to be needing as we get to mass scale adoption of EVs. So that's all in the works, and these programs, the Fleet Advisory Program is one that's really helping us understand how fleet level electrification is going to happen. As you can see just from your fleet of vehicles, we have other participants that have over 900 vehicles in their one fleet. And we're recommending on the level of 8890 DC fast chargers just to meet their needs. So what does that look like at just that one little, I call it little, but that 1 yard where you're going to have 80 or 90 DC fast chargers, and how are we going to be able to support that one fleet, and then multiply that by the number of fleets that are in Massachusetts that we're going to be needing to support. So we're working on it. It is the answer, but and we don't have all of the answers. We're asking for all of this information and data to help us get the help that we need from the regulators as well.
Another objection that we hear to conversion to electrics is that you don't have any gain if, in fact, the electrical power is generated from coal-fired plants or dirty power in general. I mean, will the electric company be able to provide some assurance that the power that they supply will also be cleaner or green?
Yep, that's definitely a question we're getting, and I've been doing transportation electrification for over 10 years now. And it's definitely something that we've worked on as a state. I think the state has worked on it. We don't have any coal-powered plants in operation in the state anymore. So the Northeast grid is fairly clean compared to the rest of the country, but we definitely have a long ways to go to add more renewables and wind and solar. But that is something that the state itself is working on, as well as the utility.
Yeah, the state has been disappointed because Quebec Hydro it will not be coming our way, or more of it through that system that they were going to bring through the state of Maine, which was very much opposed to it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one directly, so I can't really speak on it, but I know that there's a lot of folks within National Grid that are working on that, as well as at the state level, and we are in direct talks with the state to make sure that we align on the goals of the Commonwealth to get us to net zero.
Okay. Are there other slides, more slides?
This is the last one. So this is, just next steps. So, review the slides that we send you, the report that we'll be sending you soon. Reach out with questions. Please remember to log on to the program's online portal to view more electrification resources and review case studies and procurement assistance. And then we recommend that you share this report with other stakeholders, and feel free to reach out if you'd like additional support presenting these findings. And then just last thing I'll show you. Okay. We'll also be providing you with this Excel supplement. And so this just gives you a way to break down the different results of this assessment. So there is this README tab with instructions for how to use this, and some tips and tricks and some potential questions to ask that this dashboard can help you to answer. So this summarizes the 5 EV recommendations. So you can break it down by retirement year, department, type of vehicle, and kind of get these graphs that show the breakdown of those vehicles that we're recommending. And then you can also take a look at, this is, ultimately the data that we use to run your assessment, and you can look at, one-to-one replacement recommendations for each vehicle in your fleet. And then finally, if you have any adjustments you'd like to make, you have the ability to do so in the these green tabs. So just if there's any new data that you want to add to the fleet or anything you want to update, you can do that here. And that's it for me. So we'll send this to you today, and feel free to reach out if you have questions or anything like that. But I think we'll open it up to questions, and if there's no questions, I'll hand it over to Andrew.
Questions? Well, I have one other question, and that is, we would be interested in any data you have regarding police departments. I've had a couple of conversations with our chief, who's very receptive, but obviously to take a big step like that, we need to ensure that we put an interceptor on the road, that it's going to be able to go through an entire shift with adequate power. So I know that the surrounding communities are also purchasing hybrids, and I'm not sure if they're plug-in hybrids or not, but I'm interested in what police departments are doing, because that's where we have most of our vehicle expense. The other departments, buy a truck from time to time, but certainly less frequently than the purchase of police vehicles. So if you have information about what other departments are doing, that would be useful for us to consider.
Yeah, and I believe some of that is on the fleet portal, but we can certainly pull together some case studies and kind of articles that we've compiled on the use of EVs in police departments specifically.
Okay. I guess we're all set. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good. I
Thank you
recorded
all.
this, and we'll keep a recording of it, make
Okay.
it available to others who were not on this program today.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
All right. Anything else you had, Andrew?
Nope. I think you covered the next steps. We will send everything that we covered today in an email. I do live in Tampa, so hopefully I have power long enough to send it to you guys. But if not, it might take a couple days.
Well,
But-
Andrew, let me know and I can send it over.
Wow.
All right.
Charge your
Okay.
phone, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.